Sarah Chen squinted at the faint blip on her monitor, her heart racing. After months of scanning the night sky, she might have finally found it. The elusive exoplanet her team had been searching for. She leaned in closer, adjusting her glasses as she fine-tuned the telescope's focus. The observatory was silent save for the soft hum of equipment. At 2 a.m., Sarah was the only one still working, but she couldn't tear herself away. Not when she was this close to a breakthrough. "Come on, show yourself," she muttered, fingers flying over the keyboard. The blip grew stronger, more defined. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it. She reached for her phone to call her supervisor, but stopped short as a strange light filled the room. It wasn't the soft glow of dawn. This light was sharp, almost painful to look at. Sarah shielded her eyes, stumbling back from her workstation. The air crackled with energy, making the hair on her arms stand on end. "What the hell?" she gasped, fumbling for something to hold onto as the room began to spin. The light intensified, enveloping her completely. Sarah felt a wrenching sensation, as if her very atoms were being pulled apart. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The observatory dissolved around her, replaced by a swirling vortex of color and light. Sarah felt herself falling, tumbling through space and time. Just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Sarah landed hard on a smooth, cool surface, the impact knocking the wind out of her. She lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, her mind reeling from what had just happened. Slowly, cautiously, she opened her eyes. Gone was the familiar sight of her cluttered observatory. Instead, Sarah found herself in a vast, domed chamber. The walls shimmered with an iridescent light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The air was thick with a sweet, unfamiliar scent. Sarah pushed herself to her feet, her legs shaky. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Is anyone there?" As if in response, a section of the wall rippled and parted, revealing a corridor beyond. Sarah hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to stay put. But curiosity, the same drive that had led her to become an astrophysicist, pushed her forward. The corridor was lined with the same shimmering material as the chamber. As Sarah walked, lights pulsed ahead of her, guiding her way. She ran her hand along the wall, marveling at its texture, cool and smooth, yet somehow alive. After what felt like hours but could have been minutes, Sarah emerged into another chamber, even larger than the first. And she wasn't alone. Tall, willowy figures moved about the space, their skin a pale lavender hue. They wore flowing garments that seemed to shift and change color with every movement. Sarah stared, her scientific mind racing to categorize what she was seeing. One of the figures noticed her and approached. She, was easily 7 feet tall, with large, almond-shaped eyes that shimmered like opals. "Welcome, Sarah Chen of Earth," the being said, its voice melodic and soothing. "We've been expecting you." Sarah took a step back, her mind whirling. "Who are you? Where am I? How do you know my name?" The being smiled, a gesture that was both familiar and alien. "All will be explained. Our queen is waiting to meet you." Before Sarah could protest, she was being led across the chamber towards an ornate archway. As they walked, she couldn't help but marvel at the advanced technology surrounding her. Holographic displays flickered in the air, showing star charts and diagrams she could barely comprehend. They passed through the archway and into a smaller, more intimate chamber. At its center stood a figure that radiated power and authority. The queen, Sarah realized, her breath catching in her throat. "Sarah Chen," the queen said, her voice rich and commanding. "We have much to discuss." Sarah squared her shoulders, pushing down her fear and confusion. Whatever was happening, she was determined to face it head-on. "Yes," she said firmly, "we certainly do." Queen Zara of the Lumina studied Sarah with piercing eyes that seemed to glow from within. Her tall, lithe form was draped in shimmering robes that appeared to be woven from starlight itself. A delicate crown of crystalline structures adorned her head, pulsing gently with an inner light. You must have many questions, the queen said, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. Sarah nodded, struggling to maintain her composure. Where am I? Why have you brought me here? Queen Zara gestured gracefully, and a holographic display materialized between them. It showed a star system Sarah didn't recognize, with multiple planets orbiting a brilliant blue sun. You are on Lumina Prime, the capital world of the Luminan Empire, the Queen explained. We have been observing your species for many cycles, watching your progress and development. Sarah's scientific curiosity momentarily overrode her fear. You've been studying us. For how long? Since your kind first looked to the stars with wonder, Queen Zara replied. We've seen your triumphs and your struggles, your capacity for both great good and terrible destruction. The hologram shifted, showing scenes from Earth's history, from ancient civilizations to modern marvels. Sarah watched in awe as millennia passed before her eyes. But why me? Sarah asked, tearing her gaze away from the mesmerizing display. Out of all the humans you could have chosen, why bring me here? Queen Zara's expression softened slightly. Because of your passion, your intelligence, and your unwavering pursuit of knowledge. These are qualities we greatly admire, Sarah Chen, and they are qualities I wish my daughter to learn. The Queen waved her hand again, and the hologram changed to show a younger Luminan. She appeared to be in her late teens by human standards, with a curious gleam in her opalescent eyes. This is Princess Lyra. My hair, Queen Zara said, a note of pride in her voice. She is of age to begin her education about other species, to prepare her for her future role as ruler of our empire. Sarah's mind raced as she began to understand. You want me to teach her about humanity? The Queen nodded. To be an effective leader, Lyra must understand the cultures and societies that exist beyond our borders. Your species, with its rich diversity and complex history, offers invaluable lessons. But I'm an astrophysicist, not a historian or anthropologist, Sarah protested. Surely there are others more qualified. Your scientific background is precisely why we chose you, Queen Zara interrupted. You have the ability to analyze, to see patterns and connections that others might miss, and your work has already brought you closer to the stars than most of your kind. Sarah fell silent, overwhelmed by the implications of what the Queen was proposing. Part of her was thrilled at the opportunity to learn about an advanced alien civilization, but another part remembered her life on Earth, her family, her colleagues, her research. How long would I be here? She asked quietly. Time flows differently here, the Queen replied. What might feel like months or even years to you would be but a moment on Earth. When your task is complete, we can return you to the exact moment you left, if that is your wish. Sarah's head spun with the casual mention of time manipulation. The scientist in her burned with questions about the physics involved, but she pushed those thoughts aside for now. And if I refuse? Queen Zara's expression hardened slightly. That would be unfortunate. Your presence here is vital to our plans for future cooperation between our species. We would prefer your willing participation, but we are prepared to ensure your compliance through other means if necessary. The implied threat sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She realized that despite the Queen's diplomatic words, she wasn't really being given a choice. Taking a deep breath, Sarah squared her shoulders and met the Queen's gaze. I'll do it, she said firmly. I'll teach your daughter about humanity. But I have conditions. A flicker of surprise crossed Queen Zara's face, quickly replaced by a look of interest. Oh, and what might those be? First, I want full access to your scientific and historical archives. If I'm going to represent humanity, I need to understand your civilization as well. Second, I want the freedom to explore your world, not just be confined to a classroom or palace. And third, Sarah paused, gathering her courage. I want your word that no harm will come to Earth or its people as a result of my actions here. The chamber fell silent as the Queen considered Sarah's demands. Finally, a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. You are bold, Sarah Chen. Very well. Your conditions are accepted. Welcome to Lumina Prime. Your education of Princess Lyra begins tomorrow. Sarah's first meeting with Princess Lyra was nothing like she expected. Instead of the formal introduction she had anticipated, she found the young Luminan princess perched on a floating platform in what appeared to be a vast library, surrounded by holographic displays and ancient-looking tomes. "You're the human," Lyra exclaimed, her opalescent eyes wide with excitement. She gracefully leaped down from her perch, landing softly in front of Sarah. "I have so many questions. Is it true that humans only live for a single century? How do you accomplish anything in such a short time?" Sarah blinked, taken aback by the princess's enthusiasm. "Well, yes, our average lifespan is around 80 to 100 years. But we've learned to make the most of the time we have." Lyra tilted her head, curiosity radiating from her. "Fascinating. And your vision, is it true you can only see a fraction of the light spectrum? How do you navigate in low-light conditions?" "We've developed technologies to help us see in the dark," Sarah explained, finding her footing. "Night vision goggles, infrared cameras." "Oh, like our bioluminescent adaptations," Lyra interrupted, her skin briefly glowing with a soft, pulsating light. Sarah's scientific mind kicked into overdrive. "That's incredible. Is that a natural ability of all luminans?" Lyra nodded eagerly. "Of course. How else would we communicate in the deep oceans or the caverns of our moon colonies?" For the next few hours, Sarah found herself engaged in a rapid-fire exchange of information. Lyra's questions jumped from topic to topic: human biology, Earth's ecosystems, the intricacies of human social structures. Sarah did her best to keep up, marveling at the princess's quick mind and insatiable curiosity. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah settled into a routine. Mornings were spent with Lyra, covering everything from human history to pop culture. Afternoons were dedicated to Sarah's own education, poring over Luminan archives and exploring the wonders of their advanced civilization. She learned that the Luminans had achieved interstellar travel millennia ago, establishing a vast network of colonies and alliances across multiple galaxies. Their technology was beyond anything Sarah had ever imagined. They had mastered manipulation of matter at the quantum level, harnessed the energy of stars, and even discovered ways to bend the fabric of space-time itself. But as Sarah delved deeper into Luminan society, she began to notice troubling undercurrents. Despite their technological marvels, the empire was rigidly hierarchical. The royal family and a small elite held most of the power, while the majority of Luminans lived lives strictly controlled by tradition and law. One afternoon, as Sarah was explaining the concept of democratic elections to Lyra, she noticed the princess's brow furrowing in confusion. "But how can common people be trusted to make such important decisions?" Lyra asked. "Surely they lack the knowledge and perspective needed to govern effectively." Sarah chose her words carefully. "It's not a perfect system, but it allows for a diversity of voices and ideas. Sometimes the collective wisdom of many can surpass the judgment of a few, no matter how well-educated or well-intentioned those few might be." Lyra fell silent, contemplating this. Sarah could almost see the gears turning in the young princess's mind. As the weeks turned to months, Sarah noticed subtle changes in Lyra. The princess began asking more probing questions, not just about human society, but about her own. She sought out perspectives from Luminans of different social classes, much to the consternation of her royal guardians. One evening, as they watched the twin moons of Lumina Prime rise over the crystalline spires of the capital city, Lyra turned to Sarah with a serious expression. "Sarah, do you think our way of ruling is wrong?" Sarah's heart raced. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground. "There's no perfect system of government, Lyra. Every civilization must find its own path. But I believe that the strongest societies are those that value the contributions and rights of all their citizens, not just a select few." Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "I've been thinking a lot about what you've taught me. about human concepts like freedom of speech, equality under the law, the right to pursue happiness. We don't have those things here, not really. And I'm starting to wonder why. Sarah placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. She had come to care deeply for the young princess, and she knew that questioning the status quo could be dangerous in a society as rigid as the Luminan Empire. "Keep asking questions, Lyra," Sarah said softly. "That's how we grow, how we improve. But be careful. Change doesn't always come easily, especially to those in power." Little did Sarah know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The royal court of Lumina Prime was abuzz with whispers. For weeks, rumors had been circulating about Princess Lyra's unconventional behavior. She had been seen conversing with commoners, asking probing questions about the Empire's policies, and even suggesting reforms to age-old traditions. Sarah noticed the sideways glances and hushed conversations that followed Lyra wherever she went. The princess, however, seemed oblivious to the stir she was causing, her mind alight with new ideas and possibilities. One afternoon, as Sarah and Lyra were discussing the concept of civil liberties, a royal advisor interrupted their session. His luminescent skin pulsed with barely contained agitation. "Your Highness," he said, bowing stiffly, "Her Majesty the Queen requests your presence in the throne room immediately." Lyra frowned. "Can it wait? We're in the middle of an important lesson." The advisor's eyes flickered nervously to Sarah. "I'm afraid not, Your Highness. The matter is urgent." Sarah squeezed Lyra's hand reassuringly. "Go on. We can continue this later." As Lyra left with the advisor, Sarah couldn't shake a feeling of unease. She made her way to one of the palace's many observation decks, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape below. The gleaming spires and floating platforms of the upper levels stood in stark contrast to the darker, more crowded lower sectors where the majority of Luminans lived. Hours passed, and Lyra didn't return. Sarah was considering returning to her quarters when she heard hurried footsteps behind her. She turned to see Lyra rushing towards her, her eyes bright with a mix of excitement and defiance. "Sarah, you won't believe what just happened," Lyra exclaimed, slightly out of breath. "I confronted my mother about the inequalities in our society. I told her about human concepts like social mobility and equal opportunity. And do you know what she said?" Sarah held her breath, bracing for the worst. She listened. Lyra continued, her skin glowing with enthusiasm. "She actually listened. She's agreed to form a committee to study potential reforms. It's a small step, but it's something." Sarah felt a rush of pride, tinged with apprehension. "That's wonderful, Lyra. But remember, change can be slow and difficult. There may be those who resist." I know," Lyra interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "But can't you see? This is just the beginning. We can make real changes, improve lives across the Empire. And it's all thanks to what you've taught me." As the days passed, Sarah watched with a mix of admiration and concern as Lyra threw herself into her new role as a reformer. The princess organized public forums, met with representatives from the lower sectors, and drafted proposals for everything from education reform to redistribution of resources. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. Sarah began to notice increased security around the palace, and whispered conversations would abruptly cease when she entered a room. The atmosphere grew tense, charged with an undercurrent of resistance to the changes Lyra was proposing. One evening, as Sarah was returning to her quarters, she overheard a heated conversation around a corner. She recognized the voices of two high-ranking court officials. "This has gone too far," one hissed. "The princess is upsetting the natural order, and it's all because of that human." "Patience," the other replied. "The queen will see reason soon enough. And if not, well, there are other ways to preserve our way of life." Sarah's blood ran cold. She hurried back to her room, her mind racing. She had to warn Lyra, had to make her understand the dangerous game she was playing. But when she arrived at her quarters, she found them in disarray. Her personal belongings were scattered, and her computer terminal was flashing with an urgent message. It was from Lyra, encoded in a secret language they had developed together. "Sarah, you're in danger. They're coming for you. Meet me at the old observatory. Hurry." Heart pounding, Sarah grabbed a few essential items and slipped out of her room. She made her way through the shadowy corridors of the palace, using the secret passages Lyra had shown her months ago. As she emerged into the cool night air, Sarah could hear commotion in the distance. Alarms blared, and the sky was filled with the glow of searchlights. She ducked into the shadows, making her way towards the abandoned observatory on the outskirts of the capital. Sarah's mind whirled with questions. How had things spiraled out of control so quickly? And more importantly, what would she and Lyra do now? As the old observatory came into view, Sarah steeled herself for whatever challenges lay ahead. She had come to Lumina Prime as a reluctant teacher, but now she found herself at the heart of a brewing revolution. Whatever happened next, she knew there was no turning back. Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the dilapidated observatory. Its once gleaming dome was now tarnished and cracked, a silent testament to the passage of time. As she drew closer, a section of the wall shimmered and parted, revealing the hidden entrance. Quickly, Lyra's voice called from within. Sarah ducked inside, and the wall sealed seamlessly behind her. The interior of the observatory was a stark contrast to its neglected exterior. Advanced holographic displays flickered to life, illuminating a space filled with humming machinery and bustling activity. Luminans of all social classes worked side by side, their skin pulsing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Lyra rushed to embrace Sarah. "Thank the stars you made it," she said, her voice tight with worry. "We don't have much time. The Loyalists are moving faster than we anticipated." "Lyra, what's going on?" Sarah demanded, her eyes darting around the room. "Who are all these people?" The princess's expression was a mix of determination and guilt. "This is the resistance, Sarah. We've been building it in secret for months. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to protect you." Sarah's mind reeled. "Protect me? Lyra, do you have any idea how dangerous this is? You're talking about overthrowing your own mother." "Not overthrow," Lyra corrected firmly. "Reform. We want to change the system from within, to make it fair for all Luminans. But the old guard, they see any change as a threat." Before Sarah could respond, a tall Luminan approached them. His weathered face and calloused hands marked him as a laborer from the lower sectors. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly to Lyra, "our scouts report that the palace guards are expanding their search. We need to move to the secondary location." Lyra nodded. "Thank you, Zev. Begin the evacuation protocol." She turned back to Sarah, her eyes pleading. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I need your help. Your knowledge of Earth's history, of revolutions and social movements, it could be invaluable." Sarah felt torn. Part of her wanted to distance herself from this brewing conflict, to find a way back to the safety of her life on Earth. But as she looked around at the determined faces of the resistance members, she knew she couldn't abandon them. "All right," she said with a sigh. "I'm in. But Lyra, we need to be smart about this. Revolutions can quickly turn violent, and that rarely ends well for anyone." Lyra's face lit up with relief. "I knew I could count on you. Come, let me show you what we've been working on." Over the next few hours, Sarah was briefed on the Resistance's plans. They had supporters at all levels of Luminan society, from palace servants to mid-level bureaucrats. Their goal was to gradually introduce democratic reforms, starting with local elections in the outer colonies and working their way up to the central government. As Sarah reviewed their strategies, she couldn't help but be impressed by the thoroughness of their planning. But she also saw potential pitfalls. "You're assuming that once people see the benefits of democratic governance, they'll naturally want to expand it," she pointed out. "But change is scary, especially for those who benefit from the current system. You need to be prepared for significant pushback." Zev, the laborer who had greeted them earlier, nodded in agreement. The human speaks wisdom, Your Highness. Perhaps we should consider a more direct approach. Lyra frowned. What do you mean? Zeb's eyes hardened. A show of force. If we can seize control of key government buildings, we could force the Queen to negotiate. Absolutely not, Sarah interjected firmly. That's a recipe for bloodshed. We need to win hearts and minds, not rule through fear. That's no better than the system you're trying to change. The room fell silent, tension crackling in the air. Finally, Lyra spoke. Sarah's right. We stick to the original plan. Peaceful reform, step by step. As the resistance members dispersed to continue their work, Sarah pulled Lyra aside. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Once we start down this path, there's no going back. Lyra's expression was solemn. I'm sure. You've shown me what's possible, Sarah. A society where everyone has a voice, where power doesn't corrupt because it's shared among all. We may not achieve it in my lifetime, but we have to start somewhere. Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and trepidation. She had come to Lumina Prime to teach, never imagining she would help spark a revolution. As she looked at Lyra, no longer just a curious student but a leader in her own right, Sarah realized that her greatest lesson might be yet to come. The resistance was about to take its first steps into a larger world, and Sarah knew that every choice, every action from this point on, would shape the future of an entire civilization. The weight of that responsibility was daunting, but as she met Lyra's determined gaze, Sarah found herself ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The following weeks were a blur of clandestine meetings, careful planning, and narrowly avoided detection. The resistance movement grew stronger by the day, with more luminans from all walks of life joining their cause. Sarah found herself at the heart of it all, using her knowledge of Earth's history to help guide their strategies. But as their influence expanded, so did the pushback from the Loyalists. Security measures across the Empire tightened, and rumors of arrests and disappearances became increasingly common. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm about to break. It was in this charged atmosphere that Lyra made a bold decision. We need to confront my mother directly, she announced during a resistance leadership meeting. No more hiding in the shadows. It's time to bring our demands into the light. Sarah's stomach churned with anxiety. Lyra, are you sure that's wise? Your mother hasn't exactly been receptive to change so far. Lyra's eyes blazed with determination. She hasn't had a choice before, but now, with the support we've gathered, she'll have to listen. We'll request a public audience, lay out our case for reform in front of the entire court. The plan was risky, but Sarah had to admit it had merit. A public confrontation would make it harder for the Queen to simply dismiss their demands or resort to force. Still, the potential for disaster loomed large. As they prepared for the confrontation, Sarah worked tirelessly with Lyra to refine her arguments and anticipate potential counterpoints. They drew on examples from Earth's history, the peaceful resistance of Gandhi, the civil rights movement in America, the fall of apartheid in South Africa. Finally, the day arrived. The great hall of the palace was packed with members of the court, government officials, and even representatives from the outer colonies. The air thrummed with tension and expectation. Queen Zara sat upon her crystalline throne, her face an impassive mask as Lyra stepped forward. Sarah stood nearby, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Mother, Lyra began, her voice clear and strong. I come before you today not just as your daughter, but as a voice for all Luminans who yearn for change. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, but she remained silent, allowing Lyra to continue. For too long, our empire has been ruled by tradition and hierarchy, leaving countless voices unheard and potentials unfulfilled. We have achieved greatness in technology and exploration, but we have neglected the very foundation of our society, our people. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lyra pressed on, outlining their proposals for reform. from free elections to equal access to education and resources. She spoke of the human concepts of democracy and civil liberties, painting a picture of a luminant society where every individual had the opportunity to thrive. As Lyra spoke, Sarah watched the faces in the crowd. Some looked intrigued, others skeptical, and a few downright hostile. But no one could deny the power and passion in the princess's words. Finally, Lyra finished, her gaze locked on her mother. "The time for change is now, Mother. Will you stand with us and lead our people into a new era of prosperity and freedom?" The silence that followed was deafening. Queen Zara slowly rose from her throne, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was low but carried throughout the hall. "You speak of change, daughter, but do you understand the cost? The chaos that could ensue? The very fabric of our society could unravel." Lyra stood her ground. "Change always comes with challenges, Mother, but the cost of remaining static, of ignoring the needs and desires of our people, is far greater." The queen's eyes flashed dangerously. "And who are you to decide what our people need? You, who have been influenced by alien ideas, who would throw away millennia of tradition on a whim." "Not a whim," Lyra countered, her voice steady. "A carefully considered path forward, based on the wisdom of countless civilizations, including our own." Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd. "The princess speaks truth." It was Zev, the laborer from the resistance. "We, the common people, support her vision." More voices joined in, a chorus of agreement rising from various parts of the hall. The queen's guards shifted uneasily, hands moving to their weapons. Sarah held her breath, watching as Queen Zara's face cycled through a range of emotions: anger, confusion, and finally, a flicker of something that might have been fear. "Enough," the queen's voice boomed, silencing the hall. She turned to Lyra, her eyes blazing. "You would turn my own people against me. Very well. If this is the path you choose, then let us see it through to its end." With a wave of her hand, the queen summoned her advisors. "Prepare for a public debate," she commanded. "My daughter wishes to challenge our ways. Then let her defend her ideas before all of Lumina Prime. In one cycle's time, we shall let the people decide." As murmurs of shock and excitement spread through the hall, Sarah caught Lyra's eye. The princess gave a small, determined nod. The confrontation had not gone as planned, but it had opened a door. Now, the real challenge began. The cycle leading up to the public debate was a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah and Lyra worked tirelessly, refining arguments, gathering data, and preparing for every possible counterpoint. The resistance movement mobilized, spreading their message to every corner of Lumina Prime and beyond. As the day of the debate approached, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and anxiety. She had come to love this alien world and its people, and the thought of returning to Earth seemed increasingly distant. Yet the weight of responsibility was immense. The future of an entire civilization hung in the balance. The debate was to be held in the Grand Arena, a massive structure that could hold hundreds of thousands of luminans. As Sarah and Lyra arrived, they were met with a sea of faces, some hopeful, others skeptical, all eager to witness this unprecedented event. Queen Zara stood on one side of the central platform, regal and imposing. Lyra took her place on the opposite side, with Sarah nearby as her advisor. The air crackled with tension as the moderator, a respected elder from a neutral colony, stepped forward to begin the proceedings. For hours, mother and daughter engaged in a passionate exchange of ideas. Queen Zora argued for stability, tradition, and the tried and true methods that had built their empire. Lyra countered with visions of progress, equality, and untapped potential. Sarah watched with bated breath, offering quiet suggestions to Lyra when needed. She marveled at how far the young princess had come, no longer just repeating Earth's history, but adapting those lessons to create a uniquely luminant path forward. As the debate neared its conclusion, Queen Zara played her final card. "You speak of freedom and choice," she said to Lyra. "But what of security? Our current system has kept us safe from external threats for millennia. Would you risk the safety of our people for these lofty ideals? A hush fell over the arena. Sarah tensed, recognizing this as a critical moment. But Lyra, to her surprise, smiled. "Mother," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the arena, "true security doesn't come from control and isolation. It comes from strength. The strength of a united people, all working together because they choose to, not because they're forced to." Lyra turned to address the crowd directly. "My fellow Luminans, I don't stand here asking you to dismantle everything we've built. I'm asking you to build upon it, to take the best of our traditions and combine them with new ideas, to create a society where every voice is heard, where every individual has the chance to reach their full potential." Her words seemed to resonate through the arena, touching something deep within the Luminan psyche. Sarah felt a shift in the energy of the crowd, a surge of hope and possibility. As the debate concluded, the moderator announced that the people would have one full rotation of Lumina Prime to consider what they had heard before casting their votes. The choice was simple: maintain the current system or embark on a path of gradual democratic reform. The wait was agonizing. Sarah and Lyra sequestered themselves in the old observatory, surrounded by their closest allies. They had done all they could. Now it was up to the Luminan people to decide their fate. Finally, the results came in. Sarah held her breath as the numbers were announced. It was close, incredibly close, but in the end, the vote for reform won by a narrow margin. The next few days were a blur of activity. Queen Zara, true to her word, accepted the will of the people. She agreed to work with Lyra and a council of representatives from all levels of society to implement the reforms gradually. As Sarah watched Lyra address the people, now not just as a princess, but as a leader chosen by popular support, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment tinged with bittersweetness. Her mission, it seemed, was complete. Later that evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the celebrating city, Lyra turned to Sarah with tears in her eyes. "We did it," she said softly. "And it's all thanks to you." Sarah shook her head, smiling. "No, Lyra, you did this. I just showed you some possibilities. You're the one who made them real." Lyra took Sarah's hands in hers. "Will you stay?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "There's still so much work to do, so much to learn." Sarah looked out at the glittering expanse of Lumina Prime, then back at Lyra. She thought of Earth, of the life she had left behind. But she also thought of the incredible journey she had been on, and the difference she had made here. "Yes," Sarah said finally, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. "Yes, I'll stay." As the twin moons of Lumina Prime rose in the sky, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, obstacles to overcome. But together, humans and Luminans working side by side, they would forge a new path, one of cooperation, understanding, and shared progress. The future, Sarah realized, was brighter than she had ever imagined, and she couldn't wait to see what it would bring.